listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. What happens when four clarinetists walk into a room? I'm not sure, but something tells me you're going to want to find out tomorrow at the next Music N Mavens show. The Clarinet Summit explores the versatility and history of the instrument through classical and traditional duos, trios, and quartets. Two clarinetists have joined me in studio this morning, Myron Schultz and Chris Wolf. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Simon.
Well, Chris, thrilled you could come on air a little bit early today. It's so fun to have you on the other side.
Yeah. It's nice to be here.
And Myron, it's great to have you back. This is a show of your creation. What inspired you to bring so many clarinetists together?
Well, it started with Naum and myself and doing a duo concert a couple of years ago. And we thought it would always be good to expand that and see what more clarinets would add to the experience for ourselves and for the audience. And so we just took a leap, and Carla gave us that rope to hang ourselves with.
I got to say, I love the title of this show, the Clarinet Summit. Summit referring to the highest point of something like a mountain or hill, but also referring to a meeting like a conference, typically of heads of state. So tell us about the delegates that you've assembled for what I'm assuming is going to just be top-notch peak playing.
Yeah, and let me say that it was really more the meeting of minds than it was so much the self-aggrandizement. So, sorry, the question was,
I'm curious about the delegates who you've assembled. You've already mentioned Naum.
So Naum and I started it. So Naum is the guy that any clarinetist of any note in the city has to go through because he's the premier instrument technician. And he's also a wonderful teacher and musician.
And player.
And a hell of a great guy. And then we talked about Chris. Chris has been around a long time. Chris and I first encountered each other in 2000, as I recall. You were with the Chai Folk Ensemble.
Yep, that's right.
And Finjan was doing a concert with Chai at the time. And we were meshing on some tunes, and so we got to know each other then. And then the fourth member of the Three Musketeers is Norman Rosenbaum. And Norman and I go way back because he was a student of Ted Oyen back in the 70s when I was also a student of his. And Norman is a student of Chris.
Yeah, Norm's been studying with me for years, and it's always great when he stops by on Monday nights. He's a lawyer, and I sometimes think he sees the worst in what humans are capable of. And I think he uses clarinet as sort of therapy, and he's a great player on top. So. Yeah.
All right, Chris. So listeners know you best as music director here at the station, an afternoon host. But long before your radio fame, as Myron was just alluding to, it is with the clarinet that you've made your living, teaching, playing, gigging. You're still doing it, as Myron was just alluding to. Can we go back to the very beginning? When did you start playing clarinet?
Well, back in the day, I was living in Edmonton. It was grade 7, and the band program I was in, you needed to play clarinet or flute before you needed to play saxophone. Story as old as time. So I picked clarinet, and it wasn't long after that, actually, that Benny Goodman passed away. And there was a big documentary on PBS about Goodman. I thought, man, this is great. And it's stuck ever since.
The rest is history.
I thought you were going to say that there was some connection between the fact that you started playing clarinet and he died.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, that good as a grade 7 clarinetist Chris Wolf was.
Yeah.
You went on to complete undergraduate studies in Brandon and a master's at Arizona State, and you're well-versed in the classical side of things. But listeners may not know that you spent a number of years as music director of the aforementioned Sarah Summer Chai Folk Ensemble, right?
Right, yeah. I spent 3 years there, and it was a great learning experience. They approach things very differently than the classical world. There's a lot of ear involvement and just sort of how to run rehearsals, what needs to happen and whatnot. And it was a great way just to meet people and have fun playing music. Yeah.
Let's talk more about that, the difference in classical versus traditional playing. Do you want to talk a little bit more?
Well, Myron will get you to chime in on this one. Yeah, I mean, classical it's all about sound, and you got to sound great, and everything's got to be there. Whereas with folk playing, it's okay to let loose and let things ride, as it were.
Yeah,
really let them roar.
Myron, you're an expert on the traditional side of things, a true treasure trove of information and ability. Anything you'd like to add in terms of the classical versus folk side of things? Versus is probably the wrong way to word it, truth be told.
Well, I started also classical. I don't have Chris's pedigree in that respect, but I started out studying classical. And then I got involved with the High Folk Ensemble and sort of evolved out of classical as I was also going to university and focusing on other things. But interestingly, the aforementioned Ted Oyen was playing, it was a pop show, and I think Stanley Black was the conductor, and they were playing an arrangement of a Freilach, which is the traditional Jewish dance. And at that point, I was already at Chai and playing the music. And he comes to me and he says, give me some advice on how to do some of this stuff. So I was, giving him a little bit of guidance. But there were certain times where I felt, this folk stuff is a little too rough for my senses. I grew up in a very classical music family, but I've come to appreciate not the verses, but the bridge and the connections between the music and the playing, and it's not that different, really.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, good players are good players. Yeah. Good musicians are good musicians. I mean, it's if the two things are there, then there's no reason why you can't make great music. So
there's four great players who've been assembled for this Clarinet Summit. I guess the big question is, what are we going to hear?
Clarinets.
Makes sense. All right. Well, that concludes our interview. Thank you both for being here this morning.
We're going to hear a very, very, very classical trio.
Yeah, by this guy, Jacques-Jules Buffel, who is a guy I actually needed to look up. Clarinetist, wrote only for clarinet, first prize, Paris Conservatory, contemporary of Bizet and all those dudes. And the trio is... there's some tricky bits, but it sounds a little bit like Bizet and a little bit like Mendelssohn.
Did you ever play the Hofmeister concerto?
No.
To me, it sounds a little bit like a Hofmeister piece.
Yeah.
But very, very beautiful and classical.
It's late classical, early romantic. Yeah, it's fun.
Beautiful, beautiful piece of music.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to go off the charts a little bit. We've got Khachaturian.
Saber dance.
And we've got a couple of jazzier pieces. And the aforementioned Bizet. We've got something from the, what are we calling it?
Well, we were talking about this in rehearsal. I'm just going to say it. It's called the Gypsy Suite, but we can't say Gypsy song. Gypsy song, right? Yeah. We can't say that.
So the Roma song.
We're changing it to Roma. Yeah.
Yes, the Roma song. All right. Well, it's going to. You mentioned, just in terms of the various composers and whose tunes you're using. Again, duos, trios, quartets.
No duos.
No duos.
We have to. We were going to do a duo, but. We went for something else instead of the duo.
Perfect. Ditch the duo for something else.
Duo, yeah.
So we've got trios and quartets happening, and these are all pre-existing, or did you do any arranging yourselves?
We did not do any arranging ourselves.
Really wonderful. Okay, so you just get to play, which is, an art
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself.
So eloquent.
Myron, we were talking about this before we went to air. I was just so blown away by your performance last year with Myron Kudievich, the two Myrons show. Myron Kudievich on the accordion. You're no stranger to Music and Mavens. How many times have you performed as part of the series?
I'm not sure I'm contractually allowed to answer that question. I'm not really sure. I've done a number of them. Carla's been generous with my flights of fancy on things that I've wanted to try doing. There was with Mayors of Sambor, with my sister Erica and brother Victor and Dan Kulak, we did that, which was also one of these classical folk bridge things. The two Myrons, the Summit last year, and probably one or two others over the years I've done of various forms. And it's a great outlet for musicians to be able to take a gamble on something.
Chris, what about you? I feel like a bad friend. You haven't done the midday Music and Mavens before,
I've never done Music and Mavens, although I know the Rady Center very well. Folklorama is held there, and I played there for many, many years as part of Chai. So, yeah, it'd be nice to get back there.
Obviously, you're not going to be on air tomorrow. Thankfully, Terry's going to be filling in because, you got a gig. Are you looking forward to a midday show?
Yeah. It's gonna be great. It's just gonna be great to play music with three other great clarinet players. So yeah, it'll be a real treat.
Well, I'm sure you'll all enjoy the afternoon. Thank you both for joining me early this morning. Before I let you go, Chris, you're not only a clarinetist, but you are our music director here at the station. So I said, hey, Chris, what do we put to air to end this interview? So, Chris, what do we put to air to end this interview?
Something I was actually hoping I could get a copy of that the four of us could play, but I couldn't track down my copy. It's the Izzy Clarinet Quartet playing their version of Flight of the Bumblebee.
Oh, my God.
Well,
that's going to be depressing.
and Chris Wolf, thank you both for being here this morning.